So the question of responsibility and the question of ethics and the question of breath as the open system, we can now, in connection to all of this, talk about the ethics of breathing. And when you bring the question of, I would say that breath is one way of learning totally new ethics, totally new style of life, totally new way of behaving in the world, totally new way to understand responsibility. And for example, if we take the question of responsibility, we need to take the word very literally here. The ability to respond is where the word responsibility comes from. And when you are consciously practicing your breath, you are every moment, when you are cultivating your breath in the breathing practice, for example, in mindfulness of breathing, you are responding every moment to that breath. So you could take it as a practice of growing or cultivating your responsibility, how to respond to everything that happens. And the breath is happening all the time, how to become more conscious of that. And then it also could be a practice of this co-breathing in the ethical sense. I have written about in one book, which is here. This book also came out in 2018, now in April. This is a book called Borders and Debordering. It's a book about philosophy of hospitality. And hospitality is, of course, one deep question of ethics. How we welcome the other, how we see the other, how we respond to the other. So what kind of ability to respond as responsibility we have for others, other people, the nature, animals, everything that is happening. And then finally the question of air around us, which then comes to us. And I have invented there a new concepts of hospitality. I talk about aerial hospitality and respiratory hospitality. And if we would understand this question of hospitality, of welcoming the other in a new way from as a practice of ethics in connection to cultivation of breathing, this would bring perhaps totally different kind of ethics and this kind of like attitude towards the planet and to nature, is that we are, first of all, there is aerial hospitality, which is a pure gift from the air. The air is totally hospitable towards us. It doesn't care at all. Normally, if we are hospitable towards other people, we have conditions of hospitality normally. I bring you, you can come to my house if I like you, or you have a certain kind of, I want to at least know your name. I want to know that you don't have bad intentions. I don't invite to my home anybody from the street. So we normally, we have all kinds of conditions, and countries have all kinds of conditions of who they welcome over their borders. Of course, one important thing connected to this is that air does not have any borders. There is no borders in the air. So the air itself is totally has totally unconditional hospitality. It doesn't. It gives us a gift that we can be here. The air allows us all the time to be here. It doesn't condition us depending on our race, or what I already mentioned is that it doesn't, it includes us whatever we are. Even the bad people, or the people that we would think that are totally immoral or totally criminal or racist or whatever, the air is so hospitable that it even gives air to them. It gives place for them. So there is something that we could perhaps learn, is that if I could become, what could I learn from this kind of hospitality? Then another level of this is that and this is connected then to the spiritual practices of meditation, for example. Non-judgmental attitude is the same way air doesn't have any kind of judgments about others. It just welcomes. It is pure welcoming. Is like how perhaps this could transcend my personal ethics of how I see good and bad, because air is beyond good and bad. In a certain way, this would be a new way of understanding Nietzsche's ethics of going beyond good and bad, or beyond good and evil. This idea is from Bachelard. Bachelard, in this book, Air and Dreams, talks about Nietzsche's ethics, and he calls a possibility of aerial ethics, which would be this kind of a new way of going beyond good and bad, or good and evil. And it would be like Nietzsche is connected very often with total transmutation of all values, total revaluation of all values. So this kind of aerial ethics could be a total revaluation of all values, because we start to think them, whatever our ethical concern is, we would think of it, what would air do? What could air, as this fundamental, invisible, life-giving atmosphere, could teach us about it? Then there is the respiratory hospitality. Is this that normally there are human hosts and human guests, and the human host invites and welcomes the human guest to his house. But in order that this can happen, is that both the human host and the human guest, they are both respiratory hosts, because they are hosting into their lungs. They are like, normally in hospitality, we talk about welcoming with open arms. So in breathing, we could see that breathing actually could be seen as welcoming with open lungs. So we take this totally mysterious air that we have to welcome, but we could take it as a certain kind of welcoming practice of like how I could, as best as possible way, as friendly way, as welcoming way, invite this aerial stranger, this aerial guest, this atmosphere into my lungs, and make it feel as comfortable inside me. And then as a good host also, how gives a great welfare of saying goodbye to the guest, and makes the guest feel as good as possible from that, when he was in, or she was in the in my place. So how I could release and get that air to feel as good as possible when it's coming out from me.
And I'm going to put that, I think that would just be an amazing technique to literally sit and focus simply on the experience of welcoming the breath in, and then, you know, saying goodbye to the breath as it departs. You know, just if people want to have like one practice that they take from this to just discover, you know, something that they can actually experience, like, to me, that would just be such a simple and beautiful experience to sit and just say, you know, every breath, completely welcome it in, and then give it this loving send off as it leaves us.